India has a long history of communal violence across the nation. From time to time, different communities have been found shedding blood of their own countrymen. But there was one incident which stood out of all, one which our country can never forget: Operation Blue Star, as we know it. For the first and the only time, our nation saw the complete extent of the force and power the state can use to curb incidents in which religion supersedes national interests. It was in the early 1980s when the state of Punjab was facing the worst crises it had ever seen. Insurgency was at its peak, and mass killing in the name of faith became common across the state. All this started with the 1972 Punjab elections, in which the Akali Dal lost to the Congress. In the aftermath of those results, the Akali Dal proposed a resolution called the Anandpur Sahib Resolution, which was a set of demands. Apart from the economic, linguistic, and religious demands, the resolution read: the authority of the center should be confined only to the defense of the country, foreign relations, communications, railways, and the currency. It also asked for the recognition of Sikhism as a religion different from Hinduism. The proposal was sent to the ever powerful Indira Gandhi government, which ultimately got junked because of several demands made in the resolution that got considered by the government to be a promotion of secessionist sentiments.
Years passed, and in 1981, Sant Jarnail Singh Bendranwale, a powerful religious leader in the Sikh political circle, joined the Akali Dal to launch the Dharam Yudh Morcha in 1982 to implement the Anandpur Sahib resolution. Thousands of people joined the movement, feeling that it represented a real solution to their demands of a unified Punjab. Bendran became an important figure in the Sikh political domain because of his public support of the demands mentioned in the resolution.
Bindranwale's rise as a religious messiah and a political leader for Sikh youths in the early 1980s resulted in a series of violent murders and riots, which devastated Punjab. He called for the unity of the Sikh community to fight those whom he referred to as the enemies of Sikhism. The insurgency kept on growing at a large scale, and violence against Hindus, Nirankaris, and within the Sikhs became prevalent. Bindranwale was arrested several times, but everybody knew that he was a too powerful religious leader to be held captive. In most such cases, he got freed. In July 1982, then president of the Shiromani Akali Dal, Harchand Singh Longowal, who hailed Bindranwale as the stave to beat the government, invited him to take up residence at Harmandir Sahib complex to escape arrest. On the 19th of July 1982, Bindranwale, anticipating his imminent arrest, took shelter with approximately 200 armed followers in the Guru Nanak Niwas guest house in the precincts of the Golden Temple.
Amid all these events, political pressure was mounting on the Indira-led Congress government. Several religious leaders within the Sikh community who supported the Nirankari ideology, newspaper editors, and political leaders too were killed during this time. In October 1983, Bindranwale's followers torched 6 buses carrying Hindu Nirankaris, which led to massive outrage in the country. All eyes were on Indira Gandhi in New Delhi, who had had enough now. President's rule now was imposed in the state of Punjab immediately. Communal tensions between Sikhs and Hindus kept on increasing as Hindu mobs in Karnal, Haryana murdered 8 Sikhs and set fire to a Gurdwara on February 19, 1984. Indira Gandhi had made up her mind by then. Bindranwale and his supporters had to surrender and leave the Akal Takht immediately. Several rounds of talks and discussions were conducted between the Indian government and Bindranwale's militia group inside the Harmandir Sahib complex, Amritsar. From senior leaders like Narsimha Rao to security agencies like Research and Analysis Wing, all government bodies got involved in these talks from time to time. Indira Gandhi's patience was running short day by day. In an interview in first week of March 1984, when asked about the actual situation on the ground in Punjab, Indira replied, "Indeed, the situation is grim. Extremism has risen, and especially in the minds of the youths. Violence is prevailing, and most of those who are being killed are Sikhs, being killed in the name of Sikhism." Months of negotiations gave no fruitful results. The government has started receiving internal intelligence reports stating the mass presence of ammunition and guns inside the Golden Temple. These reports made Mrs. Gandhi realize that Brindaran had already prepared himself for any incursion by the state, and dialogues now had become irrelevant. Therefore, in June 1984, army vehicles could be seen patrolling the city of Amritsar. On 2nd June, Operation Blue Star had been initiated to flush out the militants from the Golden Temple. Operation Blue Star was launched to remove Bindranwale and his followers, who had sought cover in the Amritsar Harminder Sahib complex.
The whole area around the Golden Temple was sealed shut by the security forces. The army entered the Golden Temple complex on 5th June under the command of Kuldeep Singh Barar. Bindranwale's forces responded with continuous gunshots, and armed forces responded futilely. The Bindranwale's men were completely surrounded by armed forces inside the Akal Takht and were continuously firing from inside the building. Commander Parar, the operation commander himself, was a Sikh and knew what it would mean to enter the Akal Takht with all the force. By that time, the armed forces had completely lost more than 50 men of their own, and all eyes were now on Indira Gandhi, who had to decide the fate of the operation. She knew that the operation needed to be completed in the shortest amount of time in order to avoid the engagement of the supporters of Bindran Vale from outside, and she was aware of what it meant to go inside the Harminder Singh Sahib. Finally, Indira Gandhi gave the signal to storm the temple. On the night of 5th June, two tanks entered the premises of Harminder Sahib and the building was bombarded twice. The Akal Takht building suffered heavy damage. The forces had full control of Harminder Sahib by the morning of 7th June. Later that day, the forces entered the building only to find every single man dead, along with Bindranwale and Major General Shah Beg dead. Court Martial Shah Beg is known to be the mastermind behind the preparedness and training of militants of Bindranwale's group. Heavy gunshots and, shockingly, two rocket launchers were found to be present inside, which describe the extent of preparation by Bindranwale and his group. Almost 90 soldiers of the Indian Army, Border Security Force, Special Security Force, and Central Reserve Police Force got martyred, and 300 of Bindranwale's men are said to be killed during the operation. which also included innocent Sikhs who were used by him as a cover shield during the operation. The Indira Gandhi government was criticized hugely for the violent handling of the situation, the intelligence failure, use of brutal force, and storming of the Akal Takhtar, said to be the reasons why the operation turned out to be so violent. If we talk about Operation Woodrose, if it was a series of operations carried out by Indira Gandhi led Indian government in the months Operation Blue Star to prevent the outbreak of widespread public protest in the state of Punjab. These operations included mass arrest, elimination of Bindranwale supporters, and those who had been vocal for Khalistan in the past. These operations were hugely criticized by human rights activists, accusing the government of using brutal measures to curb the fundamental rights of the citizens. General Arun Shrindar Vaidya, the chief of army staff during this operation, was assassinated after his retirement in Pune in 1986.
One may argue on the handling of the situation by Mrs. Gandhi, but the truth remains that the nation had to pay a huge price because of it. Indeed, if a list was to be made of the bloodiest operations sponsored by the state in the history of independent India, surely Blue Star would stand at the second after Polo. This operation was inevitable, but could it have been handled in a better way?